Welcome to episode 143 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from WoW Insider, OutDPS, and the Call to Auction podcast.
And I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter.
And this is Frostheim from Warcraft Hunters Union, WoW Insider, and Frostheim WHU on Twitter.
And I'm Molly Sander from the Hunting Party Podcast. And that is not from the Hunting Party Podcast.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Well, today is Saturday, September the 1st, 2012, and if you want to participate in the chat room but aren't registered, boy, I have like nothing to tell them to type. They can type, poor Yuri's kids in the chat room.
Wait, can you guys actually hear that? Because I had it on mute.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What, so my mute's just not working.
No,
Hold
maybe
on.
your kids are just that loud.
I was going to say, there's definitely a wall between me and them, and that I think they're upset with something, but I'll put it on mute again. Maybe this time it'll stick.
It's not
To say that?
I'll just tell you that right now.
Wow, that's weird. Well, in any case, I apologize for my upset kids. My wife is taking good care of them. They're just unhappy with it. They're unsatisfied with our service.
So we're joined today in the live chat room by some screaming children. It's torture over there. They're torturing them. They are Canadian, though, so they probably deserve it. So we're joined today by Akator, Erez77, Blade Wisp, BM Jaeger, Euripides, Githa, Gorbrax, Havtor, Homer Jade, Hotshot Gun, Tror, Hunter Extraordinaire, Quaney, Licked, McDougal, Premox, Slugslinger, Warvinny, and, as always, your lovely moderator, Ollie Sonder. If you have any questions about crazy stuff that happened in patch 5.0.4, which hopefully you guys have all played with by now, please send it in a private message to Ollie Sonder. She will determine whether your question gets asked and in what order your question gets asked based on your answer to what exactly should you do in a blue moon.
Excellent question. I think I know what's wrong with Yuri's kids, because I don't know if you saw this. There was a news article the other day that in the Montreal, Quebec area, which is where Yuri lives, there was this great heist, and like 10 million pounds of maple syrup was just stolen. And so I think Yuri's kids have no syrup for their pancakes, and this is just causing them to go into a fit of rage.
So is that like in Canada, is that what they use for currency? It's like, Canadian rupees?
I think so. Yes. I think it's something of greater importance than it is here in the U.S. That's for sure.
Yeah, because in that case, steal your 10 million pounds, gallons, whatever of maple syrup, and you're rich. So for announcements, the final WHU All Hunter in-game event of Cataclysm. The first thing we're going to do is stuff that's going to be more low-level friendly. We are going to ask that everybody make sure they have the glyph of explosive trap. And Bella is currently working on making sure that the WHU Guild Bank is going to be stocked with glyphs of explosive trap. So if you don't see it in there at any given time, try back the next day. We're going to keep trying to stuff those things in there. Also, the WHU manufacturing machine is going to be busy on putting together various other items that we're going to need for the event. So it's going to be a long one, too. It's not going to be one of those short little 1 hour, hour and a half events. It's going to be a lot going on. But final event of Cataclysm, September 22nd. It's a Saturday. It's at 6 p.m. Icecrown server time. That does not necessarily mean it's 6 p.m. your time. It's 6 p.m. on Icecrown server time.
And just so you know, that the glyph, I think, has a minimum level of 25 in order to use. So I don't know if you have a level cap in mind for this, but just
we don't. But that's a good point. You should really try to be at least 25 so you can have the glyph of explosive trap. And that is some loud typing. And we are going to be forming the new Baby Hunter WHU Guild in Mists of Pandaria. It's not happening now. There's some debate about whether to make it a panda guild or a dwarf guild. However, so far, popular opinion seems to be only to allow dwarves in the new Baby Hunter guild. Probably going to go for level cap on that of maybe, well, we'll start at level 1, but we're going to never actually level all the way up in that guild. We'll probably not go any higher than like level 20 or something.
Don't pandas have to choose Horde or Alliance at level 20?
At level 10, I believe, once
At level
they
10?
once
they
they finish
can't
the starting area. Once they
Yeah,
get
and you
ready to leave
can't
their
get out of
starting
the
area, they
starting
choose.
area. Like, you can't get out of the starting area until you've chosen, if
Correct.
I remember correctly. So until level 10, they're basically locked to the starting area. But either way, I think dwarves are cooler than pandas anyways.
Probably. As somebody said, dwarves are awesome and pandas are meant to be tamed.
They do. They look like intelligent hunter pets who like beer.
Well, that's what I was
don't
thinking.
know.
I was like, there's an affinity between the dwarves and the Pandaren because the Pandaren are the brewmasters, right? They're up there with making the beer. We can get along with that. But yeah, so far the general opinion is WHU is only dwarves. Screw the pandas.
Not on this show.
All right.
So,
and last week too, wasn't there the final WHU raid? I don't know if I saw the results from that. I don't know how did they do.
Well, no, it was the previous final WHU All Hunter raid was going to do Hagara, and we killed more chalk and did some other stuff. But Hagara was the big progression boss we were trying to get, and they did not down Hagara, but they did get Hagara to less than 1%, which was heartbreaking. And so Arthemistia was like, you know what? Let's try again next week for a second final raid. And they had a similar experience where they got Hagara really, really close, but didn't quite get Hagara down, which is frustrating because Hagara is clearly downable by an all hunter raid. We just didn't quite get it. And it doesn't really count now. Now that 5.0.
It doesn't count, but if people are interested, there's another 5% off the bosses while the raid buff went up to 535. Also, you can do DS in cross-realm raid group now.
Oh, that's true. So we could try it. We could actually try it as 25, but it's not going to happen. I mean, I think Arth and I both kind of agreed that it only counted if we could do it without the patch 5.0.4 changes.
Yeah, but
with the Cataclysm.
Can't you do a 10-man in Cross Realm? If you put your real ID friends into a group, you can do a 10-man, can't you?
I would think so. I think you'd be able to do any size raid through if it's available for Cross Realm.
Yeah, right. So you don't need to do it at 25.
No, but we were able to do it 10-man before. It's just we couldn't do it 25-man, which is what we were trying to do with all the rest of the fights.
I see.
And so we just weren't able to because of the cross-realm restriction. Anyhow, but yes, so Hagar was doable. We didn't quite do it. We missed it by the narrowest of margins a couple of times.
Fair enough. So do you guys want to talk about some patch 5.04 stuff?
Yes, I think it's awesome. What's your impression, Euripides?
I haven't had as much time to play around with it as I'd like. I wasn't hugely impressed by the cinematic, but I suppose that's not what I'm really into anyways.
Okay, well, let's just agree at this point that about the cinematic, you're wrong. It was awesome.
I thought it was a very good cinematic. I enjoyed it.
I thought it was a well-made cinematic. It's just, it didn't have that, like, the first time I ever saw a cinematic for this game, I didn't even have it. I was just watching somebody play the Burning Crusade, and I'm just like, oh man, that's really compelling. I want to see what happens, And of course, you watch the beginning, the cinematic for at the time vanilla as well, and I'm just like, man, this is awesome. This is really cool. And then there's the cinematic for Cataclysm and for Wrath of the Lich King, and they were all very compelling. But this one, I don't know, it just felt kind of like, why do we fight is their catchphrase, and yeah, there's no answers. It's just, why do we fight? I don't care. You're a panda. Get out of my way. I have stuff to do.
No, now to be fair, there's no cinematic that will ever be as good in terms of, you know what this is like? Let me tell you what this is like. This is like debating, and I've had this debate more times than I care to admit, what the best lightsaber duel of Star Wars is. And a lot of people like to say that it's Luke versus Vader in Return of the Jedi. And I'm like, dude, say what you will about the prequels, but the lightsaber duel in the Phantom Menace,
yes, that's the best one in my opinion.
An amazing sword fight. And then the argument people always make is like, no, but Luke versus Vader had so much more emotional weight. It was so much more this. And I was like, okay, you could argue that it was a better scene, but it wasn't a better fight scene. And I feel like this is a similar thing. And on that grounds, no cinematic is ever, I think, going to top the Wrath of the Lich King one. You know, where we had that huge story weight of Arthas going behind it, and listen to his father talking the whole time. It was just badass. But I do think the Mists of Pandaria cinematic definitely captures the lighter feel that they're trying to go to.
Yeah, I agree. Although I think in terms of maybe it wasn't the overall best cinematic, but probably one of the best moments would have to be the vanilla cinematic, with opened up with the dwarf hunter and his bear, and
That's right.
He puts the beat down on the Tauren, so that's pretty hard to top in my book. But yeah, I think emotionally and whatever, I think the Wrath of the Lich King cinematic was probably their best one.
Yeah. So, anything significant in the patch other than the cinematic, or is that basically it?
Well, I was listening to the instance, and they were talking about experiments they had done where a hunter and a druid were seeing if the hunter could ride the druid, and they actually kind of made it work. They were doing kind of jumping thing at Dragon Soul.
So did they actually get a hunter to ride a druid, or did they get it so it kind of looked like a hunter was riding a druid?
They said that it looked like the hunter was riding the druid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it works.
They could stack one of the forms of a druid or something, right?
Yeah, Homer Jade says you can ride travel form.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so the other question is, are we talking about like the dirty kind of riding? Mounting, or are we talking about? No. Okay. So yeah, travel form. Okay, so let's talk about
the actual game.
Yeah, let's talk about
the actual
bugs
patch.
and not actually bugs, because there's a lot of things that were reported as bugs that weren't actually bugs.
I got one of those, and I forwarded them to you like a dum-dum.
It was funny because I replied.
I was
to
taken
that
in because I hadn't read your news.
Right, and I replied to it, and by the time I sent the reply, your reply came in. So you caught it really fast.
Well, not too fast. Anyways, the point is, somebody said, I'm missing target dummies. What's wrong? And I replied back, maybe Frost can tell me. And then I went to check on his site, and sure enough, Frost wasn't at his computer, and he told me target dummies are level 93. I'm like, oh, well, that would do it. So I replied back, never mind, I'm an idiot. Check this link. And that was that.
Yeah, and this was...
long-time friend of the show.
It was astounding how many people were... going to the target dummies, like, I'm going to test my DPS with my new stuff, and like, oh my god, my DPS is horrible. And some people who looked a little closer went, wait, why am I missing? Why am I being dodged? I'm supposed to be hit capped. And yes, it's because it's a 93 target dummy. It has a lot more armor. Your shots do less damage. Your pets have much bigger glancing issues. It's all sorts of stuff going on.
Yep.
Yeah, and are there level? I thought I heard too that there was a level 85 dummy possibly.
Yeah,
I'm told
that Stormwind has an 85. I haven't actually been to Stormwind since the patch hit, so I can't say. I know Ironforge still doesn't.
Well, Stormwind has a standard PvP dummy, which is level 85, but like a level 85 player, not a level 85 instance boss or whatever. So does that mean anything with the skull on it is level 93 now? Like, how did they handle that? Because they have bosses from earlier expansions that have skulls on them.
Yeah, they're
as hard to hit as it's hard to hit as a 93 now, but other than that, it's going to have the same, I guess, resistance and damage and all that stuff as whatever it would have.
Right, the same armor and damage of like a 63 vanilla boss, okay. Right? Yeah. But yes, so yeah, 93. So that's the reason your shots are missing, your damage is so much lower on the raid dummies. Also, and actually, speaking of things, I got pulled in by this one, which I really, really shouldn't have. Which is
on Twitter.
Explosive shot ticks. Like a whole bunch of people are like, "Oh my god, explosive shot is still clipping," and I'm like, "What? What?" And I tested. It is clipping. What? Of course, it's supposed to be clipping, as we discussed way back when this news first came out. They're changing the way explosive shot works, so technically, yes, it can still clip. But what happens is if it ever clips a shot, that clip worth of damage essentially gets added into all the other ticks and divided by the other ticks, so it's spread out amongst the ticks. So even if you get 4 explosive shots in a row, which you can do, it's yes, you will get holy crap. Yes, you will get clips, but you'll still do the full damage of all of the explosive shots.
And how exactly is that spread out? I thought it was only spread out to the next one. Like if I fire in two globals in a row, 2 explosive shots, and they land exactly 2 globals in a row, it's supposed to tick. It's supposed to clip. But I was under the impression that when I overwrote the last tick of my of the first one, the first tick on the second one would be as much higher as the damage that it overwrote. But you're saying it's spread even more than that? It's spread out over the whole shot?
It's divided by the 3. It's divided by the 3 ticks. Actually, technically, I think it's divided by 2 because your shot actually lands right away. But yeah, when it overwrites or when it clips, the extra damage gets put back into the entire shot formula and redivided by all the ticks that remain. So
if you clip that one again, then that higher amount gets redivided into yet a third one. So in theory, you could actually get some pretty good burst if you're able to clip it on purpose, like in PvP, for example.
And if you got lucky enough to get your, or lucky enough or controlled enough, but I mean, there's nothing like those rare occasions where lock and load procs right after you fire explosive shot. That's awesome.
Explosive shot,
lock and load, explosive shot, I have 4 in a row. Whoa!
And readiness is class wide now, so
yes.
So you could be like explosive shot, lock and load. And because I think you can still proc a lock and load from a trap. So that's explosive shot, a proc lock and load, 3 explosive shots in a row, hopefully, within 1 global cooldown of each other. And then readiness, which is off the cooldown readiness is on the global, I think. Yeah. So and then so you wouldn't be able to clip that last one. But
and if you use a trap to force it, you're also splitting your first out from the lock and loads anyway.
If you have the trap placed.
Right, and somebody just happens to step in it at the right time.
Yeah, but you usually control when it'll go off because you know how long it takes to arm and you know where they're going to be.
Sure.
Anyways.
So another thing I've been hearing a lot about, that's been happening in the WHU comments, and I've been getting Twitter things about it. People talking about people complaining about how little damage explosive shot does, and going so far as to say arcane shot is actually doing more. If you do a pure arcane shot rotation, you do way more damage. This is not true. An explosive shot rotation will do substantially more damage than an arcane shot rotation.
Why would they think that then? I mean, if they were right, that would be just horribly designed and have to be fixed. But
it's poor understanding of RNG. It's somebody was disappointed with how little their explosive shot was ticking, and they probably went, I fire an arcane shot, it does this much damage. My explosive shot does less damage per tick. And then at one point, they did a rotation with and a rotation without, and happened to get a high end and a low end of the RNG curve, and went, oh my god, this is better. Because as I recall, the person reported as being better by like a few hundred. It's like, dude, a few hundred? Your margin of error is way bigger than that.
Yeah. But the fact that they're that close indicates that there might still be something. Because I think their goal has been in the past, because there have been times that we don't use our signature shot or our signature talent as an example. And anytime that happens, even if it's an edge case, they've always tried to design it so that it remains equally balanced, but it now becomes very obvious that there is no better solution than using your signature whatever.
It's obvious right now. No,
but if the margin of error is, if there's any situation if there's any reasonable test that you can make where the margin of error is sort of smallish and that could show you the wrong one, then it might be considered too close. Like if they're within 10% of each other in a perfect environment, then it's, in my opinion, too close.
Okay, well, let me give you an example. I'm gonna go to female dwarf, and we're gonna see what female dwarf says at level 90.
I was just gonna say, why don't you check, because you can can you take explosive shot? You can take explosive shot out of the rotation on her.
Yeah, but
on her
Bushcaller has come out and said that the sims are all wrong, and that if at level 90, all the specs should be within 5% of each other. And that's currently not the case. So I'm not sure we can necessarily...
Actually, it is the case currently.
Oh, it is. They fixed the Sims. Great.
Well, no. The Hunter specs are within 5% of each other. I think what's happening is, and I'm not actually joking and just boasting here, I honestly think Hunters have far superior theory crafting than a lot of other classes do. And I think Hunters are simmed pretty well. I mean, we do we have pretty exhaustive research into the mechanics behind the shots, both between Sahara and the people running Simcraft and the Elitist Jerks people. There's a lot of work going on the Hunter stuff. And so I think more bugs and mis-simmed things get caught on Hunters than anything else. But
that
I
I
mean,
would agree with.
so looking at like level 90, level 90 on average, your explosive shot does 54,000 damage. This is just with some random level 90 gear and all buffs. And your arcane shot does 28,000 damage.
Okay.
Right, that's not close.
Well, I'd be more curious to see what a survival rotation that forced explosive shot out and then dealt with the focus as best it could, how that would fare versus because like if you're able to optimize a spec or something so that your rotation without explosive could actually be viable or within 10% of it otherwise, and I don't think that's a good design.
I think 10% is a huge.
Let me ask you this: how much of a damage hit would BM take if they couldn't use kill command? Whatever that hit is should be the same for all the specs.
Yeah.
A good amount. That should be whatever that is. That feels balanced. Whatever that is should be the same for all specs.
Well, let me tell you this. Let's take a look at the DPS difference. The setup that I'm looking at is simming to like 63k. If I actually rejigger this so that we're not going to use explosive shot, we're just going to use arcane shot, which does have a lower focus cost. That'll cost me 6,000 damage. So that's right around a 10% difference. And to me, that's huge. I mean,
that is absolutely huge. But what would that be if you just took kill command off of a BM spec of the equivalent setup? Whatever that, don't do it on the air. My point is, whatever that answer is what they should be designing for survival, and that's the only point I was making. If survival is known as a spec that it doesn't, where you're, I suppose that I shouldn't try and say what would be best for survival. I'm not a game designer. I don't know what makes survival fun, but I have a feeling that making it really, really obvious and as obvious as it is for every other hunter spec, that explosive shot just kicks ass. You remember when they really buffed explosive shot? And survival
I hear what you're saying with the idea that your signature shot should be super badass. By the way, if you are Beastmaster and you remove kill command at level 90, you're losing maybe it's like 11%.
Okay.
It's minusculely different, yeah.
All right.
I mean, taking explosive shot out of the rotation is obviously not what they've intended. It's a huge component of the survival gameplay in terms of what they designed with the whole lock and load proc and everything else. So I mean, by removing that, you eliminate a lot of the gameplay that's built into that spec. So I mean, if it is weak, then you'd have to expect that Blizzard would go ahead and buff it to the point, or nerf arcane shot or something like that. But I don't know. Arcane shot's one of those things that since all the specs use it, I guess it's kind of hard to just try and balance it for a single spec.
I think if Beastmaster is 11% and survival is 10% and marksman doesn't matter because it can't do enough DPS right now anyways, then I think...
Well, actually, that brings us to the next point on our spreadsheet.
Fair enough.
Is how do the three specs really compare right now? And they, in 5.0.4 Live, marksman was doing much better than it was at 85, than it was doing at 85 on beta just before 5.0.4. And at least what I'm seeing is it's still, and they did just have a little nerf to BM, but it's still BM, SV, MM. But MM is not far behind SV anymore. It's no longer that giant gap. So, I mean, you still technically want to play BM. If you want to play SV, you're probably going to do just as good as BM. If you want to play MM, you can probably do that. You'll just be a little bit worse.
Fair enough.
And this is really, really, really nice to see because that sort of before 5.0.4, MM was not in a good spot at 85.
Yeah, that was quite a departure from what we had talked about before, which we figured, MM, you were just going to respec out of it. But once 5.04 hit, I had some other hunters in our guild say, hey, I'm here on the dummies and I'm switching back and forth between specs and I seem to be doing sometimes a little bit more with MM. And anyway, they felt that MM was right up there with the other specs in terms of how they were doing.
And it is absolutely within a nice little narrow margin right now. So I'm not sure what actually changed between the beta and live, but it's still number 3 in a 3-person race, but it's not being lapped anymore.
Fair enough. So do we want to talk about some of the bugs?
Yes.
Let's the talk actual about bugs?
Sure. Let's talk about the big one. Kill command.
Yes, doesn't work on Altraxian or Madness, and apparently that the note here is that there have been recent reports of it working, so it might have been fixed.
Yeah, I've got a couple reports of it working just in like the last 12 hours. And I don't know if this is just a weird buggy thing that most of the time it doesn't work and sometimes it does, or if they hotfix something. Because we were kind of talking about this before the show, and the theory that this is something that they could probably fix by hotfixing the boss as opposed to fixing the ability.
And even within, like, say, the last 12 minutes, we've had a couple folks in the chat room sit there and say that they have tried, like an LFR and using kill command on both those encounters and having it work. So maybe, like I said, they have fixed something.
Right.
And got it working again.
And we don't know what they fixed. If we don't know if they, managed to hotfix the ability or just hotfix the bosses. My bet is they hotfix the bosses. And the scary thing here is this creates a possibility that every now and then there'll be a boss that kill command doesn't work on until they fix it.
I think it's far more likely that if they're testing a boss, before it releases, they're going to make sure all the abilities work on it. That's typically been the case. It's just that because these bosses were tested under the old kill command, that it's pretty much easier to go. It's much harder to go through all the old bosses that have ever been created and make sure that all the abilities work on it than it is to do it for the ones that you're currently releasing. I'm sure part of the standard, QA before it goes out is to just make sure that all attacks work on the boss that were intended to be there. So the next bug, I don't know if this is still there, but Murder of Crows does not benefit from Master of Beasts, which is, I believe, the mastery.
Yeah, that's Beastmaster's mastery. And there was a blue post on that where people were mentioning it. And that was a big part of the reason why Murder of Crows wasn't being recommended as a talent choice for Beast Mastery hunters. But there was actually a blue post saying that is indeed a bug.
Okay.
Right. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see once it is on there. It'll be interesting to see whether that changes the talent choice for that tier for BM or not. I mean, one of the nice things with BM is, for most fights, you're apt to go into the fight guns blazing, popping all your cooldowns. And so BM can get their Big Red Pet discount on Murder of Crows, which is an expensive ability. Mm-hmm. And so getting that for half price is nice.
Fair enough. Darkbrew, you're more of a developer guy. You want to read the next one? Oh, sorry, for the raid checklist add-on.
Wait.
We have one more.
We got one more bug / not exactly what people thought. Huge reports were that Spirit Bond doesn't work in combat, which is, the healing you and your pet every 2 seconds. Like, it's great.
Did we talk about this?
No. It's great until we talked about it before the show.
Oh, maybe that was it.
It's great.
Distracted.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, that's great, except for when I need it, it doesn't work. I did a bunch of testing on this last night. It turns out it is working. There is a bug, and the bug is with the icon that appears on the top of the screen. So, in other words, you've got your little Spirit Bond icon up, everything's doing good. You enter combat, the icon disappears for 2 seconds, and it reappears, and sometimes it stays for a while, sometimes it disappears for 2 seconds and comes back 2 seconds later. But you are getting your Spirit Bond healing every 2 seconds. So the ability is working fine, but it's just the icon that was tricking people into thinking the ability, including myself, into thinking the ability wasn't working. It's one of those, I'm like, enter combat. What? My icon, my Spirit Beast Bond went away, and now I'm fighting, so I'm not looking up to see that's popping back. And of course, if you're getting healed, you can't really tell where the heals are coming from. But yeah, so Spirit Bond is working, and hopefully they'll fix the bug that causes the icon to disappear and reappear.
Sounds good. And the other thing we were going to talk about was this. If people remember the add-on called Raid Checklist. This came out for Cataclysm, and it was one made by a hunter for hunters. And this one shows all the buffs, debuffs, dispels, everything that's available in your raid. So it looks at your raid composition, who's in your group, and tells you who can bring what, which pets can bring what. And it was, I love this add-on. I use this for that whole expansion because it was just very handy to help determine what pets I should bring to my raid. Well, it hasn't been updated yet for Mr. Pandaria, and in part the reason was Anya, who was the add-on author, actually quit WoW, but she mentioned on Curse in the comments area for the add-on that she's in the process of updating it because she's had so many requests from people in the community that like this add-on, like to see an updated version, that she is taking her time out, even though she doesn't play the game anymore, and because she's a hunter and awesome, and she's going to do an update for the add-on for everyone.
Yeah, and the awesome thing about this is, she has quit the game, but it gotten such overwhelming requests for the new version. She got a free-to-play account, so she can go in the game to update the add-on for the game she's not playing. But it is a super, super, super useful add-on, and it was just nice and simple.
Yes, it was simple and it was great. I mean, Blizzard has improved the default UI now a little bit. So if you check the consolidated buffs, it will show you which buffs you have in your raid and what you're missing. But this goes way beyond that functionality. So there's a little bit of a
in particular, I don't think it actually the new raid thing that they have is awesome, but it doesn't show you what debuffs you're missing, as I recall.
No, it doesn't. It does not.
Yeah.
And I don't think it necessarily shows you who can bring what. It just shows you that you're missing X buff. And some of them, like attack power buff, I don't think shows up until you actually start combat or something. We've noticed that, we've had people say, oh, we need the attack power buff. And it's like, yeah, we've got it. The hunters bring it. It's on. Once you start combat or whatever, it'll show up. So,
indeed.
Fair enough.
Alrighty. So we do have a new beta patch, which has one major change and a couple tooltip changes, I believe. But the big things is aspects have been taken off the global cooldown, which we talked about at length last week.
I'm so excited about this.
And that is on the beta, not on live yet.
Right.
Yeah, but this is one of those things that, like the minimum range removal hunters, like there is no hunter that liked this change beforehand, and there's no hunter that is not now excited about having the change reverted. It's just that universal; they all hate it.
Yeah, what's great about it is because there was Ghostcrawler did actually post about this before the change went into the beta, saying that they were going to do it. I suppose we could talk about that too. But one of the things he mentioned, he said, I can't provide any information on when this will happen. Hopefully, we can fix it before you start leveling from 85 to 90. He said, no promises. I'm just sharing our intent. But it sounds like they were able to fit that in sooner than later. So
sorry, that was I do remember that post actually. He was talking what he was referring to. He doesn't know when it'll happen. What he was referring to is some other new design aside from putting aspects on the cooldown again. Like they were talking about maybe yeah. Well, they were talking about maybe an on-use ability or maybe some other elegant solution to penalizing us for moving. That just didn't feel like being slapped in the face by a wet fish.
Yeah, and I don't think we have this quote, but there was like a couple weeks ago an interesting Ghostcrawler quote about sort of DPS on the move, and Ghostcrawler basically said that ranged classes DPS while moving should be terrible. Full stop.
Yeah. Yep. Full
stop. And he did say, or he did strongly imply that we tried to make movement DPS a little bit better, and we went a little too far with it. And so there is a point where he's saying, we don't necessarily want your movement DPS to be quite as good as it is, which is pretty darned good with aspects. So aspects are coming off the global cooldown, but they're not going to stay this way indefinitely. They're going to change to some ability that will probably be a little less universally useful.
Yeah, I was thinking either a cooldown like free casting or clear casting that allows us to, for a short period of time, move and damage at the same rate, or another cooldown that is, I was imagining a couple of different things, like maybe a slightly longer term on use ability that just increases replaces aspects of the hawk, makes it a temporary thing, so that if you're standing still, like I was imagining a situation where you can basically press a button, and then if you don't move, as long as you don't move, you get enormous increases to your DPS.
I think it's elemental shaman who have abilities like spirit walker's grace or something like that. It's a 2-minute cooldown, but basically allows them to cast any of their abilities while moving for like a 15-20 second period. And I think Ghostcrawler, said it's possible they could do something like that for
I was imagining something like an inverse of that, where you can always cast on the move, but you don't do as much damage as when you stand still. And of course, as a hunter in a raid, your goal would be to stand still, hit your turret button, dig in some roots, and just start blasting away. Of course, in PvP, it'd be a little bit different. You'd have to time this to the availability of CC, not like get them out of the game CC, but like keep them at distance CC so that they can't munch on your face. So I'm thinking explosive traps, blinds, slows, kites, whatever. I mean, just long enough that you can get your damage off and then start moving again when you start reducing your damage.
Speaking of just general patch 5.0.4 impressions, had a situation come up last night that I think was fairly indicative of the patch for hunters. I was running a 5-man. We had a tank, a healer, and 3 hunters. And we're sitting there and DPSing stuff, and we have a shaman healer who's healing. And then at one point, the shaman's like, "Hey, hunters don't have a minimum range anymore?" And I was like, "No, we don't. It's awesome." He's like, "Well, doesn't that mean you guys could stand within range of the chain heal?" I'm like, "It's hard. It's hard to stand close. 7 years.
It feels wrong.
I know, 7 years.
It does.
Out here, it's like, what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the beginning, the almost exact same situation happened at the beginning of Cataclysm, with a shaman healer who was like, put down his little AoE heal that puts a circle on the ground, and I was like, oh, jumped out of it. He's like, "That was my heal you just ran away from." I'm like, dude, it's just, for so long, you move out of circles in the ground. Same thing here. It's like, I'm so used to staying at range. It is hard to move in.
Yeah, we were doing our raids and stuff, and one of the other hunters in our group whispered to me and said, "I'm not used to this minimum range thing." He said, I keep backing away from stuff when I don't have to, and giving up a little bit of DPS for movement there. And it's like, it's just it is one of those little things that just takes a lot of getting used to.
That's twice now. Sorry about the F-bombs, but it was
seriously.
But I'm not. Wow, those poor melee guys. There's all sorts of damage happening up by those mobs.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing, is that unless your healer asks you to, there's no reason to stand in something's face and just give it, the ability to cleave you. You should be, and melee have a lot of dancing to do, so, you should be out there where you can stand still for as long as possible, and that's usually not right in front of the boss or the mob you're going after. By the way, if you feel the urge to cuss, just change all your F's to D's, and then it'll be like, what the duck? Which will just be hilarious.
That's probably not going to happen. So another change, not a hunter-specific change, but I guess it's worth mentioning because people in the chat room keep complaining about it.
Yeah.
The loss of have group will travel.
Yeah, this is a horrible thing. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it doesn't come back in the full way that it was, but maybe we get some version of it or something that comes back. This one's really taking some getting used to. I mean,
I don't know. I'm wondering if they didn't just get rid of it because they were concerned about something with leveling. I wonder if they didn't just get rid of it and they'll bring it back as like a level 30 guild ability or something.
Maybe.
I mean, it's very. I mean, all we ever really used it for was to literally summon the raid members, to the raid. And I mean, obviously, for many years we didn't have this, and we had to actually fly to the raid instance and use the summoning stone.
We had to ride.
And warlock closets and all that good stuff. But boy, it's one of those things that once you have it,
closets.
It's hard.
One at a time.
I know, but it was so useful, and so it's one of those things that's hard to live without once you had it. It's like the microwave oven of abilities.
Yeah, and whatever you're doing, there's always like 10% or so of your group that's really late.
Mhm.
And that it was so nice to get those couple of, ducktards, just zap them on over so you can get going.
This is going to be a thing now. Eh?
Uh,
I think that we can probably say that. Well, yeah, this was convenient, but I don't know. I think that it just trivialized the whole concept of where you are in the world, because it doesn't matter as long as you have a guildie who can invite you to a group and summon you, then you can be anywhere else you want.
and they
And also, it made PvP more interesting. I'll tell you that. I think the first thing we ever did with it was that someone summoned us to the brand new level 85 Thrall. No, not Thrall.
Oh yeah,
Thrall's replacement. Garrosh. Yeah, he whipped the floor with us. This is back in patch 4.0 or 4.1 maybe.
I remember that because we bugged one of the encounters in Bastion of Twilight. So it was the those 4 elementals or whatever in the door. We shut on us and we couldn't get it open. So we had to call the raid and went to Orgrimmar, like you said.
I mean, for a while they've been doing a lot of stuff to make sort of quality of life things to make moving around easy, and I think maybe it's possible that they've decided they went a little too far, and they made and it effectively makes the world smaller, right? You no longer have as much of a sense of being in this vast world, even though it's much more convenient not to, it's like it is not fun to spend 5 minutes going from one place to another. So the other significant change in the beta patch is they nerfed pet AoE, specifically the worm and the chimera. They basically dropped their damage in half. And what was specifically happening with this is they weren't a single target DPS gain, and they were good for AoE. But if you stampeded them, it was sick, disgusting, ridiculous AoE for the entire stampede. It was horrible. Oh my god! Yeah, when you had your whole stampede worth of worms burrowing and AoEing, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Yes, I can imagine. And but it seems like the base damage going down by 50% is not going to change. And I mean, now it's going to be much less useful for non-burst AoE. And when you do, burst your AoE, it's still going to be, about half as ridiculous as it was before.
Well, there was a blue post about this, and the blue post said, and this is so very true, said that Beastmaster AoE focused pets were extremely overpowered for sustained AoE, i.e. Stampede. We reduced the damage of Frostheim Breath and Burrow Attack by 50% and increased their cost from 20 to 50. They should still be a sustained DPS gain to use, but not quite so absurdly so. Then later there's another thing about we had been balancing BM AoE with Beast Cleave as the primary AoE method. And we're thinking that AoE pets would be a small boost on top of that if you went with them. However, as we recently noticed, the AoE pets more than doubled your AoE DPS. The sheer damage that a stampede of 5 rabid chimeras were able to put out was, in a word, absurd. But so these changes should make it so it's a small boost over your normal beast cleaving pets.
Yeah.
So it's a gain to use the chimera or the worm for AoE, not a huge gain.
Well, at this point, it'd be a 50% gain because they were saying in the old system, your pets would be doubling your AoE, and now in the new system, they've half damage, so they'd be 1.5ing your AoE. I suppose that's a little bit more balanced, though.
Now, if they were doubling it and they cut the damage in half, that puts it at equal.
If they were adding, let's say you do 10,000 DPS AoE, and if they add 10,000 to make you do 20,000, and then they reduce that by 5,000, you're doing 15.
Because while they're doing their AoE, they turn off their normal attack.
Oh, that's right. Well, it depends on the context of what he was saying. I think he
if you use a worm or a chimera,
as opposed to a wolf or something.
Right, you're using their AoE ability instead of using Beast Cleave, which is the standard AoE.
I see.
And so it should remain a gain to do that, but no longer ridiculous one, which I think is just fine. So if you really want to max out your AoE damage, you can whip out the big red worm, as they say.
I think you're the only person to ever say that.
But you don't have to. You can certainly keep your wolf or your cat or your whatever buff pet you need to bring, and still do decent AoE with Beast Cleave. And Beast Cleave is just awesome. I have not yet encountered a situation where I've broken CC with Beast Cleave, so I don't know if it can, but it seems like it should not. It seems like it should not and would be likely to.
Yeah, well, we'll have to check into that.
Although, to be fair, I guess they only Beast Cleave when you multi-shot anyway, so that would break it.
Oh, there you go. So, there was a comment in here about Rabid and single target damage. Remember how we were talking about how Rabid was almost too valuable as a buff to consume?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they changed it.
No, that was Frenzy. Rabid is a pet ability.
Yeah, derp. Yeah, okay, so they changed the... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but Rabid was nerfed as a way of slightly nerfing BM DPS. And it's interesting because they do say we reduced the attack power buff from 50% to 25% of Rabid, and that BM hunters needed to come down a bit, especially in burst. And part of me, given the context of the previous comment, wonders how much of this is issues with Stampede combos.
Yeah, I was just wondering too that this is probably not geared towards level 85 where we're at now, but like I said, with Stampede might be the big one there.
Yeah. They also mentioned Snake Trap. They've reduced the melee damage of the snake by 75%.
Good.
Yeah, it was too good to be true.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah, I mean, it was reaching the point, right, where you'd almost want to consider it in your rotation.
No, it had passed that point. It had reached the point. You wanted to put Snake Trap in your rotation. We weren't talking about it because we knew for certain they would not make Snake Trap part of the core rotation.
Especially because of how annoying it is to manage.
Yeah, and Zahara first noticed this, months ago in the beta. And, it was reported like several times, and then it managed to make it onto 5.0.4. And then they quick went, oops, that was on the list, but we didn't get to it. But so the snakes are still much tougher. There is actually, speaking of bugs, there's a couple of snake trap related bugs that I don't know if they've been addressed yet.
No, not in here.
One of them is there's some issue with if you don't have a pet out when a snake trap is triggered, the snakes won't attack. And then also in addition to that, if you're not attacking when the snake trap is triggered, the snakes won't attack, even if you start attacking afterward. And so there's some weird behaviors that they still need to fix with the snakes.
I think those might have always existed and been the snakes were pretty ignorable anyways, at least in the only place that they were normally used, which is PvP. Even though it's free, quote unquote, it does cost a global cooldown, and if it weren't for entrapment, it wouldn't be worth it. But it's still almost not worth it because of the fact that they are so buggy, and they do break CC. But I think some of these bugs might have existed before patch 5.04.
Actually, I think some of it's new because one of the things that I noticed on the beta was the snakes appeared to, rather than just go everywhere, they attack what you're attacking. So
they're supposed to attack whatever triggers the trap, even if it's not your target.
See, and at least when I tested it, which was really early in beta, and so I had not retested it like in the last couple of months, but they were acting almost like a guardian pet. They attacked what you attacked. Yeah,
maybe that would just I think the problem is that the code for those guys wasn't done cleanly, and I'll bet you they're just they've made enough changes with stuff like Murder of Crows that they had to go back and clean up the code a little bit, and that'll fix a bunch of the bugs that we're seeing.
Yeah, very possibly.
So, what do you guys want to do next? Listener email or?
Let's hit Q&A.
Q&A, all right.
We got a bunch this week. A bunch of Q&A. A bunch of both, actually, but a lot of Q&A.
All right. So, who wants to go first?
All right, the first one is from Akator, who says, speaking of Rabid, tell me how to use Rabid if you're a BM hunter. Always with Bestial Wrath or always on cooldown?
You really want to use it with, let's see, Bestial Wrath is a percentage. Yeah, you really want to use it with Bestial Wrath if you can. But Rabid is a long cooldown ability, as I recall.
2 minutes.
Yeah,
2 minute cooldown.
So it's a long cooldown ability, so you really want to make sure you get the most uses out of it per fight as you can, but odds are, in most fights, you're going to get 3 uses, and so if your fight's long enough that you can delay it a bit to make it sync up with your next big red pet, it's worth doing, because you get the multiplicative advantage from the percentage damage plus the percentage attack power increase.
Yep.
Alrighty.
And that would also be good to stack with a haste effect if you can.
Right, and certainly you'll be using it, in your a little bit after engaging when you blow all your cooldowns. You'll certainly want to be using it then, but thereafter, I would say try to line it up with Big Red Pet, but not if that causes you to get 1 fewer Rabid.
Yeah,
Which will just depend on the approximate length of the fight. Diggs says, "What is the best spec for PvP? Any idea?"
BM.
And that's Zumio was kind of saying the same thing, that BM is pretty awesome for
That's where I'm basing my answer from.
yeah, and I mean, of course, the big thing there is the fact that silencing shot you can get as a talent, and readiness is baseline. So those were 2 big factors in why Marksman was such a appealing spec for PvP.
Well, and Marksman also had some pretty ridiculous burst when you could stand still, or even if you didn't have to stand still, but when you were able to just tee off with all your stuff lined up, you could do more burst damage than almost any other class. But BM is now doing more burst than Marksman.
It's okay. So it's next.
Necrary, he says, why is Link's Rush better than Blink Strike? And he says, by my math, over 3 minutes, Blink Strike would have 10 attacks, 6,000% total bonus damage, 10 hits, versus 3 uses of Blink's Rush, 5,400% total bonus damage, 27 hits, was what he had figured out.
Okay.
But I may have overlooked something.
Yeah, this is a really, really good question. If you just do the math on like, hey, 600% for 10 attacks versus whatever it is, 200%, it does look on the very surface like Blink Strike is better, semicolon, however, comma. Blink Strike has a 30-second cooldown. Link's Rush has a 1.5 minute cooldown, I think. And Blink Strike triggers the global cooldown. So every time you hit Blink Strike, you're not firing a shot. So you have to subtract the damage from what you would otherwise be doing instead of hitting that button from the total damage. And same thing with Link's Rush. But because Link's Rush is 1.5 minute cooldown, you actually lose a global cooldown far less often.
So is that the only difference, though? Is that the only reason?
Yeah. I mean, the reason is because of the number of global cooldowns you lose. I mean, yeah, if they were both off the global cooldown, Blink Strike would be better, assuming they both function correctly.
Okay.
But yeah. I mean, that's a huge difference in the number of global cooldowns you lose. And let me tell you, certainly at 85, it kind of hurts to hit those global cooldowns because the focus is piling up. You're trying to dump it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the reason. And there's obviously situations you don't want to use Link's Rush, and there's obviously issues with Link's Rush. It doesn't always attack from behind, which makes the math really funky. But yeah, right now that's the big thing is the loss of global cooldowns. So let's see. Primoc says, in a full moon, a good hunter takes her wolf form with her wolf pet and makes finger puppet shows for Euripides' kids. Although it's supposed to be blue moon, which is a full moon, but it's better. And yesterday was a blue moon. Both in and did you notice they actually put a blue moon in Azeroth?
I did see that. I noticed that. Yes.
Azeroth had a second moon. So there was 2 moons in the sky, and actually Don Moore got a nice screenshot of it. So I thought that was a cute little thing. I think I think on average a blue moon happens every 2 years, but I think we might be a little more than 2 years out from the next one. So Alex's question is, why in the heck is my average item level nerfed? I'm showing 404 average item level and 378 equipped.
Are you wearing PvP gear? Because some of the PvP gear was dropped.
Raid leaders want to know why hunters are... Oh, I wonder if it's still dividing by the melee slot.
Oh, yeah, that's another good point.
Oh,
I hadn't even thought of that.
maybe.
So it's possible that it's now you don't have a melee weapon, but it's possible it's still dividing by the number of slots as if you had a melee weapon. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. This isn't something I noticed, but that's the first thing that would jump into my mind.
Yeah, you'd be curious to check something like Warriors. Did they lose their ranged weapon in Rogues? I mean, I wonder if the same thing similar happened to them.
He says raid leaders everywhere want to know why hunters' eye levels are something low. So it sounds hunter specific. I'll tell you a really easy way to check it. Just add up the item level of all of your gear, divide it by the number of pieces of gear. That's probably what you would expect it to be. Then divide it by one more the number of pieces of gear. And if that's what it is showing as your eye level, that's what the problem is.
And other than that, if you notice any surprises when you're adding up the eye level of your gear, you're like, wait a second, I thought that was a PvP piece and it was worth this much, but it's worth that much now. That could be part of it.
Mm. All right.
And the last one is from Frostheim Bootlicker, who says, question. Between attitude, podcasts, blogs, and other media, no other class seems to match the awesome communities that Hunters has. Is this still true? What other classes come close to us?
Hunter pets?
This is indeed still true. No other class comes close to Hunters in total amount of awesomeness, and this is factually true, I think.
It's quantifiable at that.
Yes.
And measurable, and I think I read a thesis paper from a university student about it once.
Yeah,
I don't know if he passed.
And you know what? The hunter community-ness is going to get even more awesome in the near future. I can tell you that right now. But
That's not a word.
What are you talking about?
Community-ness?
Sure.
It's a word now, I guess.
Absolutely. Dude, maybe it's not a word in Canada. You guys use maple syrup for currency.
Not anymore. Did you guys hear? You know what? That's still. I don't want to talk about it. Let's keep going.
So the question, which other classes come close to us, I think is a really good question. Who is the number 2 best community? Certainly, there's a huge gap between number 1 and number 2. And Euripides might be right. It might be like, well, there's hunters, then you go way down, and then there's the hunter pet community, which is awesome, and then you keep going down.
Then there's a mini pet community.
I haven't been really up in the last year and a half or so on the other communities, which I used to kind of quasi keep tabs, not really read their stuff, but I was at least aware of what was going on. And back in the day, years ago, druids were doing pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to say Druids is probably still there, but I don't know.
I have no idea if that's still the case, but I don't. Does anybody know like other classes that have? And I'm not talking about classes that have like an awesome blog for their class. I'm talking about classes that have lots of awesome stuff for their class.
That's the thing. Nobody else has lots of awesome stuff that's like just public and out there, but they all have, I'd say, equivalently awesome forum posters and people who read about this stuff. Like if you go to the official class forums and you just look at the activity and the general level of helpfulness and not douchiness of any of the classes, hunters are obviously first, and then I think, generally all the other classes are pretty much where you'd expect them. Like druids have the most potential roles. They can be like melee DPS, ranged DPS, healer, or tank. So they probably have a little bit more than somebody who can just do multiple types of DPS. I suspect that they're all basically tied for last.
Yeah, and Aspects makes in the chat room makes a good point where he talks about how Shadowpriest.com used to be pretty good, but they've died down. Actually, I think there's like a forum that somebody sold, and then it kind of died, and then somebody bought it and shut it down. But this is my point. Like, for a lot of classes, they're like, yeah, we have this one awesome resource. Whereas hunters have just tons and tons of awesome community stuff going on.
Yeah, there's something about the hunter community that just kind of grabs people and gets them into it. But, that isn't to say that, you know what, though, there's something unique about hunters in that we're a class who has this awesome community, but there are other subcategories of players that have their own categories, or their own awesome communities. I would say that the second biggest to hunting is the one that I'm involved with otherwise, which is gold making. And actually, I would say even above gold making is probably theory crafting. Like, if you were to sum up the activity... Sorry?
And above that is PvP. There's a PvP community.
Oh, well, that's different. The PvP community is like saying the PvE community. I mean, that's kind of like grouping too large, I guess. It's like saying, yeah, I heard Warcraft players are pretty active, as opposed to, But yes, you're right. PvP is definitely one of the biggest communities, as is PvE raiders. But I would say theorycrafting, whether it's for PvP or for PvE, like the people at Elitist Jerks that just go out and find the actual ratios and numbers, as well as yourself and Zahara and folks like that, and the Simcraft people. And then gold making, I would say it's probably behind that. And then, of course, achievement collecting / pet collecting / mount collecting and all that stuff. I would put.
I think I might argue that gold making is larger than theory crafting for this reason. A lot of the theory crafting community isn't really theory crafting community like Zahara. Zahara's not really... I mean, she's a theory crafter and a damn good one, but she's a hunter theory crafter. Whereas you have some people like this, like the Simcraft people they're theory crafters. They want to figure everything out. But a lot of the theory crafting, they're really attached to a class rather than theory crafting as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't exclude those. I'd just make the Venn diagram make it clear.
Fair enough. I'm just saying that Zahara is ours. And we're not sharing.
Okay. No Zahara for you. Go away, rogues.
So in terms of which other classes come close to us, I don't know. And it's funny because in the chat room, a bunch of people are like, oh, the rogues have this and priests have this. And it's once again, here's a site for this other class. And hunters are just so leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else with the ridiculously awesome stuff that we have.
I think I would still, instead of quantifying it by the sites out on the internet, I would quantify it by the size of the community on the forums. Not necessarily official forums, but if you sum up the official forums and Wowhead and DSL reports and Elitist Jerks and all the forums that are specific to a community, and you look.
But I would add in the class specific forums, like we have the Petopia forums and the Hunting Lodge forums.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Anyhow, so should we try to answer some emails?
I don't know. I think we're over time. Do you want to get to them this week or next week?
There's like 4 of them.
Well, maybe we could do one.
Sure. Let's hit the first one on the list. They're all long.
Well, if they're all long, why don't we do the one about Viper Venom, because we haven't touched on that yet.
I haven't actually read any of them.
Yeah, let's do that one. That's fine.
So the Viper Venom question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Magoover. Awesome name. Sorry, Moogiver, even better. Asks us a question about Viper Venom as a BEC/RAS.
You just know this is a Tauren hunter.
Moogiver? No. I was thinking gnome, actually, but anyways.
Gnomes can't be hunters.
If they're named Moo, they can. I've always found that I never had enough focus when I needed, just making it hard to get into a flow, feeling comfortable with my abilities. I'm sure... Hold on. At level 63, survival hunters will get a Viper Venom, which restores 3 focus each time your Serpent Sting deals damage. If you take that does this take into account the Serpent Sting damage applied by Serpent Spread, as in if you multi-shot? Okay, well there you have it. No, it doesn't. And I suspect that he might be a lower level.
I think so, because he talks about like how at level 63 hunters are going to get this thing. Yeah, because like I never have enough focus. Like what?
Well, that's
so he probably does not have Wormstalker.
Hang in there, my friend. As soon as you hit a level cap, your problems will change. You won't have too little focus. Well, I mean at 90, I suppose.
A lot of it's the 2-piece Wormstalker.
That's true.
That just multiplies things. But either way, you should have a lot more in 5.0, 4.4.
That's right. And that's it. And either way, by the time you hit level cap, it'll feel balanced. I mean, they've even commented on this before. They try and keep the classes balanced as best as possible for all levels. But really, they focus most of their attention on level 90 or the max level at the time. So once you get to the max level at the time, I think you'll find that it'll feel a lot more balanced, and you won't feel like you're always out of focus. However, I will tell you that one of the hardest skills to master as a hunter is making sure that you have the highest activity time possible, and that you're always making the right decision with your shot. And once you've mastered that at just about any level, you'll have the most focus possible for that level. Because that means if you have a cooldown shot that's going to have a high damage per focus, like your signature shot, that should always happen whenever it's off cooldown. If you have a non-cooldown shot, you have to decide between making focus or spending focus, and that's a hard decision to make if you're just getting used to the class. So hang in there, practice as much as you can, and I suspect that your problems will solve themselves by the time you hit level cap.
All right. Fair enough.
So MacGyver is a long-time participant on another podcast. He sends in things. He's actually a very good guy.
Very cool.
MacGyver?
Yes.
Is he a Tauren?
I assume so. He does like a comment.
I would have to
questions.
think you'd, like I say, be a Tauren hunter if that was indeed your name.
He has a segment called Ask Moo. So.
All right.
Well, thanks for the question, MacGyver.
Should we hit the outro?
I think we should, and maybe we'll do a post show if we have time. But you have been listening to episode 143 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from OutDPS, WoW Insider, and Call to Auction.
And I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
And this is Frostheim from Warcraft Hunters Union, WoW Insider, and Frostheim WHU on Twitter.
And I'm Ollie Sonder from the Hunting Party Podcast. Hello, Moo.
Hello, Moo, indeed. We're on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and if you don't use any of that stuff, there are links on the show notes.
And if you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes, especially one where you mention how uncommonly good-looking Frostheim is.
You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on the air by professionals.
Although I think this title might be, I think Ducktards might be in the running for this week's show title. So you got to beat that. Well, stay thirsty, my friends, and remember to drink your dark brew lager.
Don't forget to spay or neuter your feral druid.
For the Horde.
And don't forget to pay your dues.
I can jump shot, BM, MM, and SB. I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, 'cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, 'cause I am hit capped. 'Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Rated MK dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadan, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one have we killed the most? Kel'Thuzad to Malygos. We even killed the Kama's ghost. Feels like we're getting close, all that running as a ghost. Yogg-Saron, Therian, Sartharian, Magtheridon, Saphiron, Lucifer to Sulfuron, Archimon, Amalon.